Hello, everyone. This is Windy City Radio from Chicago, Illinois. My name is Will, and joining us this evening, we have Julian.
Hello.
Charles.
Yo.
And Eli.
Howdy.
So to start off today's show, I figured we would just check in with everyone and see how everyone is coping with COVID and, like, what are you doing to, like, cope with the thousands of deaths that occur on a regular basis. So anybody want to, like, just share, like, how COVID life has been for you in the last few months? Anyone want to start?
I can start. Yeah, sure. That's fine. To be honest, it might sound kind of selfish, but the thousands of deaths, it doesn't really affect me on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. In terms of personal stuff, I have started going back to the gym, concentrating a lot of energy on improving my chess game, and what else? I don't know. I moved pretty recently too, so trying to adapt to new surroundings, but it's been okay the last month, I think, especially living at home was a little rough, but
yeah.
I'm gonna chime in and agree with Julian there that I think that, like, yeah, I mean, how do we cope with the thousands of deaths? How do we cope with the thousands of deaths of hunger that happen all the time? You know, like, it doesn't really impact us. You know, I think that, like,
a day-to-day.
Right, like on a day-to-day level, we're pretty isolated from that. You know, I mean, in terms of COVID, we're less isolated, really, and that's kind of interesting. Is that, like, it brings the point home to people a little bit more. Well, some people, obviously, there are people that just don't believe in it, which is interesting as well. Yeah.
Charlie, what do you have to say? Anything?
No, I mean, it's just working remotely. That's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah.
It would be nice if I could do something. I don't know. It would be nice to get back to what was pre-COVID, but I doubt that we'll ever get back there. I think this is going to be the new normal at least for the foreseeable future.
I don't know.
In the next few months.
Yeah. I mean, until, like, I feel like June of next year or so we'll probably be getting back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know about getting back to normal. You can never really go back to anything. Like,
right.
I don't really care about going back to anything. I want to get post-COVID, not
I
pre-COVID.
guess back to normal by, quality of life. I don't know.
I mean, like, masks. I've read some articles, and it's kind of like conflicting information. Like, you know, are we going to be wearing masks in 2022? I mean, obviously, you know, over the next few months, we could expect to still be masked, but, you know, is it going to continue in 2022, 2023? Because, you know, I mean, even if there is a vaccine and it does get distributed reasonably well, there's still going to be a pretty sizable segment of the population that is not vaccinated. Right. So you have to keep that in mind.
I mean, it's not going to be one vaccine, too. It may become just like the flu, where you're going to need an update every year. My sister, who is, like, getting a degree in public health, that's really what the experts are seeing.
Well, I mean, because normally vaccine takes, it's like 10 years to, like, properly develop, actually.
Yeah, it depends. This is going to be the fastest one before, I think, was 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be wearing a mask for the foreseeable future just because of facial recognition more than because of COVID.
That's a good point.
But isn't there technology that can...
yeah, there is. That's a good point.
Really?
But
yeah, in China.
I'm going to wear, like, a full face mask instead.
Yeah, with regards to masks, I'm probably going to keep wearing them as long as businesses require it. I mean,
I mean, we don't really have a choice.
You don't have a choice unless you want to get kicked out of the...
Yeah, when they stop requiring it, I would probably stop wearing it.
Yeah.
I kind of like, honestly, wearing a mask. I think that it's
right.
I don't mind it.
I don't want to get
when
it gets
cold.
Like,
you know,
that's
that does help. Like,
Yeah.
it's good insulation.
Right.
I mean, I'm fat, so I don't really need the extra insulation as much. But I think it definitely helps. I've noticed it because, like, I didn't even have to wear a jacket today, and it was in the mid 40s.
Yeah, I think it also has to do with, like, the facial. Like, when I have more of a beard, then I feel more insulated without the mask.
That's why I let it grow out a little bit longer.
Definitely,
like,
like,
mine in the winter.
Wearing masks, I preferred to cut some of it when I was wearing, because, like, I would get sweaty because it was also summer. I was getting sweaty under the mask when I had a full beard, so I cut that and it helped.
That's fair. Yeah, I
That's a
typically
tip.
don't wear a mask when I'm outdoors, just because I live on a street that doesn't get a lot of foot traffic, so it's not really necessary. It's easy to social distance. So.
Yeah, I mean, I do sometimes, not all the time. When I'm
I
outside.
usually do. I mean, I live in a pretty populous area,
Yeah,
and
that's
like, it's not really possible to social distance. Like, there's people all over in the streets and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, like when I'm in the loop, I'll typically wear a mask because one, it's harder to distance, and two, like I see everyone else wearing a mask, so I might as well wear one out of courtesy as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's polite. Like, even if it doesn't work,
Well, I mean,
who
it's
cares,
all
right?
risk mitigation.
Yeah.
It is,
Like
yeah.
that.
Well, it's not all risk mitigation. Some of it is
Some of it
also
is.
like social pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If if everyone around you is wearing a mask, there is kind of that pressure. Like you kind of stick out as not wearing one, so you feel sort of subconsciously or even consciously that you should put one on.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just like kind of a weird like hill to die on, right? It's like even if it doesn't work, I'm not gonna make that my thing to be like,
Yeah, my freedom, my
right.
freedom
"Screw
not to
you
wear a
guys,
mask.
I'm not gonna wear a mask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a strange hill to die
It's
on.
not. It's not really like. It's not something that's. You're not asking someone too much to wear a mask.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's,
exactly.
it's not that big of a deal.
It's
No,
easy.
not at all.
Right.
Yeah. Like I've never been approached because I wear a mask and indoors obviously, and I've never been approached by someone outdoors saying, "Why aren't you wearing a mask?" Like I haven't been. policed
I
in
don't
that
think I
sense.
have either. Yeah.
Like the rate of people wearing masks outdoors is like middling. You know.
Yeah.
Some people do, some people don't.
Right. Right.
Typically.
But I mean, it's like, the viral load that you're going to get, like the amount of exposure from just like walking past someone on the street who's not wearing a mask
Yeah,
is
pretty-
very, very,
pretty
very,
low.
it's
It
not
is, yeah.
negligible.
I don't know if there have been even proven cases of people contracting it from like
Passerby.
passerby
Yeah.
outdoors sort of thing.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think there have been. But I could be wrong about
Well,
that.
I mean, they've
haven't looked
done
into it.
studies like the particles, how long they stay in the air.
Yeah,
like
but there's a
6
difference
feet-
between
6 feet isn't like it's not like the magic number. They
But
know
it
that.
it also has to do with viral load. It's not only
Yeah.
like there being a particle, it's
Exactly.
like the
how much like spit the person produces.
not the quantity. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
it's
the
like
word I'm looking for.
they're like if there's like you can find like
Like
a
the
few
person's
particles of
payload.
anything in the air, you know, right? Like
You can, yeah. Yeah, a little random, yeah.
uranium, you know, rat poison, you know, whatever you're looking for.
Right. You know, it's interesting to like just personally when this started. Like when it started, I wasn't too worried about it, but when I got a summer job working at a grocery store in late May, at that point, I kind of like assumed that I was going to get COVID at some point. So at that point, I became less sensitized to it personally because I still kind of assume that I'm going to get it, especially during a second wave. So I take basic precautions, but I understand that realistically there is a non-zero chance of me getting it. So that's why I've been taking a lot of vitamins just to boost my immune system in case I do get it.
That's kind of the opposite for me. I was at the beginning, like in March, April, maybe into May. I was like probably, I don't want to say I was taking it too seriously, but like, I mean, there was just so many unknowns. I wasn't going out to hang out with anyone. I was like,
so
very
isolated.
like. Yeah, it was a lot more like I think like isolated to probably almost like an unnecessary degree.
I see.
But,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I did that for a few months because I moved in May or June, one of those months.
Yeah.
So I didn't really like see anyone before that, but I also kind of used an excuse because I'd been needing some isolation for a while anyway. So
That's a good point, yeah. I
I
think
got a
everyone
lot
could use it
got a lot
sometimes.
of I mean, honestly, sometimes I think about just like getting up and moving to somewhere that nobody knows me and just like spending all time inside working on stuff. everyone talks about it, but like when I talk to people after that initial wave, when a lot of people ourselves included, Julian and myself, were like isolating a lot more than like maybe was necessary. Even like a lot of people were like saying, "Oh, it was terrible." I was like, "That was actually really nice. Like I could go for that for a lot longer." And
Honestly, like when in March and April, I really didn't isolate at all. In fact, I didn't even start wearing a mask until the state mandated it.
yeah, I mean, I didn't start wearing a mask until I could find one, which took a while.
Yeah, I was in
Yeah.
the same boat. I was like, where do I buy a mask? But they're all
They were
sold out.
sold out
There's a
everywhere.
couple
Yeah.
weeks,
Yeah, no, eventually one of my friends actually made one for me, which is very
Oh,
nice.
yeah, that's what I ended up
That
doing.
was the one that I
Yeah.
used for a long time.
Bought some rubber bands at the store.
No, it was like she's like an artist, so she's like making it like sewed it up
from
and, like,
cloth
yeah.
or something.
Yeah, cloth,
Yeah.
and like there's some bands on it. Yeah.
Yeah, my aunt had a friend who was like making masks. So that's where
like,
My sister
That's
also
nice.
did have a mask business for a while.
Yeah, I had some a few months ago. I had some pants taken up at my local dry cleaners, and it took a little bit. It took like a little longer than anticipated for her to finish. So, as a courtesy, just to say thanks for waiting, she made me a mask.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
My building right now, my apartment building I live in, sells masks at the counter where you pick up your package.
My work, because we do bridge inspections, we have a stockpile of masks. So when the work
makes
said like,
sense.
oh, you can take as many as you want, you can take some for family. I was like, okay, I'll take 20.
My work shipped us out. Actually, it was. Do I have it? No, it's in my jacket. But yeah, I got some masks that have my
Yeah.
Works logo on them.
My work said they were going to do that, and then they did not do that. But I think the idea is like if people go back and they get them, but like they're like, oh, we didn't get the right supplier, or like we gotta figure this out, and they never.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy is when COVID first began and you had the shortages in toilet paper
Yeah.
I didn't know that there's a
So
huge
ridiculous.
disconnect between like suppliers for private enterprises
Oh yeah.
and for business and for grocery stores. And you'd think that there'd be like a better relationship in terms of supply and demand, but it's like I don't understand why there's such a huge gap of time for
The supply chain in many respects got disrupted, and I can kind of speak to this because I worked on the night crew when I was this past summer at a Jewel-Osco. And one night, like, it was kind of inconsistent occasionally. Like, I remember one night we got literally 12 pallets full of paper goods, and an average night we usually get 2. It was so bad to the point where we had to start storing them in the meat locker. That's how much we got, because it was just like one particular night we got just so much of it that it took like almost the entire night just to do that. So it was
Supply and demand, less than supply and demand.
Yeah, it was strange, and that's like one of the few nights that like actually happened. Because like most nights when I was working there, and I worked there from late May until early September, that it was like pretty like consistent the product we would get. But our supervisors were telling us to face groceries, which means to like arrange them in the most effective way to promote sales, to put different products over gaps so it didn't look like the store shelves were empty, just to give sort of the psychological impression that the shelves were well stocked. And like my supervisor said, pre-COVID, we wouldn't be doing this, but because the supply chain was disrupted in certain minuscule ways, but significant enough that the average shopper would know it, they wanted us to make the shelves as straight as possible up the front, just so consumers wouldn't get the impression that the store was running out of stock.
Would consumers actually get scared?
Some of them
Like,
would.
would you ever see a riot?
I don't think like
We did see some riots
there were some
Really?
riots. I think.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Really?
in May.
Oh,
Not by
okay.
May.
Yeah.
If
And
I'd
like-
been working there in March, I might have noticed it, but
Yeah.
by May, things had pretty much slowed down in that regard.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of these, I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, a lot of the companies, like, are all so specialized, right?
Yeah.
So that they supply things to, like, office buildings, and that's
Yeah.
what they do, right?
Right.
They're not set up, they don't have the relationships with grocery stores because that's just not what the company is.
Yeah.
So the supply chain is not set up that way. I mean, and they were able to pivot, but it just took a little bit of time to do
Yeah.
that.
Right. Because it was such a sudden thing that happened. The lack of like disruption was really kind of a sudden thing in a lot of respects.
I mean, there were times I was motivated to like steal one of those like fat rolls of toilet paper out of the janitor's closet at work
Oh, yeah.
because I was running out at home.
Yeah. We never really ran out.
Yeah,
honestly.
I never really had a huge issue. I was always like, I didn't get I had to get the cheap toilet paper sometimes, you know, that's like not ideal, but
Yeah.
I never really had a
There was never a
outage.
situation
Yeah.
where I could not buy toilet paper.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wasn't that worried.
Yeah, just like eat a bunch of fiber to
Yeah.
clog things up as necessary.
Just poop
Just
in
do
a
some
bucket
heroin.
and dump it out the window. You don't need it. You don't need toilet paper.
It was,
then.
hey, it was good enough for England in the 1600s.
That's
good
true.
enough for me.
Yeah.
Throw it out the window.
Start a compost. Just start composting. You actually start a garden using your own waste as fertilizer. It could work. It could work.
Next topic, please.
Next topic, please.
Unionizing sex workers. I guess in terms of sex workers, in an ideal society, in a perfect society, that I guess that that type of work wouldn't exist. But because we are in a society, it exists. You have strip clubs and women who are paid to have sex. They should be guaranteed the right to collectively bargain and organize to get fair pay and benefits for the work they do.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling about it is that, and I think it is this way in some Western European countries. I think it's Netherlands or Germany. Like, sex work is legal, and it's
Netherlands.
Okay, Netherlands, right. I mean, it's taxable work, and it's perfectly legal. I think that would probably make the most sense. It's like, it's that argument, like, people are gonna do. I mean, and this could like extend to like, like weed legalization or something. Like, people are gonna do it anyways. You might as well regulate it and make it safer and make a profit out of it.
I don't know. I think that's not a fair comparison. I mean, talking about
From, like, weed drug prostitution.
Legalization, it's like drugs aren't people, right? Like,
Well, it's an industry though. It's an industry at the end of the day.
I mean, that's why it's so
an
important to
industry, but like,
unionize.
you're not like, there's no inherent exploitation to doing drugs, right?
Well, not the act of doing the drugs, but the supply chain and where it comes
and
from.
legalizing actually actively helps stop that, right? Like,
Yes.
regulating that. But like, when it comes to sex work, that's impossible to remove the exploitation aspect.
Yeah.
So like, I definitely agree that like, I agree that sex workers should definitely have the right to collectively bargain, but I think that ultimately it comes down to making it like a bottom up. I don't think it's like anyone else's place to like tell them what to bargain for or how to do it. It's like we give them the space to unionize themselves and like
you give them the agency to do
resources
so.
if they need to. And, like,
I mean, first it has to be
but
decriminalized or legalized.
my perspective is that it should be a criminal offense to solicit, but not to provide. And like, I think that sex workers themselves should not be criminalized, but I think that Johns should be criminalized.
The pimps should be thrown in jail.
And pimps as
pimps,
well.
that's
Of course.
That's
But
like
I think that criminalizing Johns is like the most important aspect.
Just to be clear, what does John refer to? What's
John is someone who
soliciting.
solicits sex
I
work.
see.
Yeah.
Okay.
A
So-
customer of
A
sex
customer,
work.
gotcha.
So then, like, the argument would go as well that if you're going to have sex workers, I guess, say a strip club, they should have the right to collectively own that establishment.
Yeah, I mean, a strip club is not like so. There's
not the
sex work,
same
and
as,
there's different kinds of sex work, right?
There
like,
is, yeah.
It's like there's a difference between like full service sex work and like stripping, right?
Or burlesque, yeah.
I mean, I think like right. Ideally, neither one would exist, but like they do,
Yeah.
so we have
Yeah.
to deal with that. But yeah, I think that like there's. Yes, I think that it should be able to be collectively owned. Yeah.
Because isn't Nevada?
Everything should be
Nevada's the only state that prostitution is legal. That you have brothels.
I believe
Yeah,
so.
brothels,
I think
yeah.
it's legal in like all their counties except for like Las Vegas.
I think so.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah.
But it's illegal at the federal level, though.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, marijuana is also illegal at the federal level and
That's
legal
true.
in several states,
Yes.
including Illinois.
Yep.
including Illinois.
indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, JB.
Yeah. That's a big part of why I voted for him.
Yeah. Well, what's fucked up about that is, even though you've had decriminalization, at least not full decriminalization, but to some extent, you've had people let out of prison for non-violent drug offenses. All of these weed companies are owned by white people.
Not
which
all of them.
doesn't necessarily solve the problem when you have white people that, they're just in the industry to profit. They're not the ones that have been marginalized by like cops and systemic racism.
Yeah,
So you're not really solving the problem by having these white.
Well, what
Companies,
there's
why-
more than one problem.
Yeah,
right?
what problem are you referring to?
Like, no, legalizing weed did not solve white supremacy. Like, I
No,
don't think anyone
I'm
thought
not
that
saying-
would happen.
It's a major contradiction.
or racial disparities.
It's a major contradiction.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Like,
contradictions,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
we
I'd
live
say
in
so.
a society.
Indeed we do. Indeed we do. Next topic.
Yeah, what do we have up next?
That's a good question. Cuban diaspora.
I guess in terms of Castro and Cuba, I will say that the American mafia and Maya Lansky, especially, who had casinos and a lot of money invested, who, you know, are the mafia, American mobsters, who are criminals and have done nothing to contribute good to Americans, I guess, to any society. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for their casinos to be confiscated by Castro and the communists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, we were talking about this
I-
earlier. The point that I was making is that, you know, I don't necessarily think that the like standard of living in Cuba is like some like great thing that like, you know, countries should aspire to necessarily.
But I mean, the change compared to what they were before is.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a very yeah. I mean, like, look, I'm not like some like Batista apologist. That's clearly not perspective that I'm taking, but I don't know. I wouldn't like look at Cuba and like point to it as some kind of like ideal society. You know what a great form of government.
I mean, there's no ideal society, right? We live in a material world.
Yeah.
There's no. I am a material girl. No, I mean,
I don't think it's not necessarily fair to as Americans to criticize Cuba when, as a country, we don't even have. We're a settler colonial state, and America is actively involved in imperialism. I just don't think it's fair
I mean,
to
it's not
criticize.
my-
I don't think we need to go that far. I think even
it's
like
not
just
my
looking at like
personal responsibility to like, you know, take the fault for like everything bad America's
But
done.
to
That's
criticize
that's
Cuba-
completely absurd.
But to criticize Cuba or any world in any third world country is just not fair.
Right.
I mean,
when-
technically, Cuba would actually be a second world
Yeah.
country, but
Yeah, you like kind of
Technically,
like
yes. Using the official definition of that, yes, Cuba is second world.
yeah, I mean, I think that
Even
also we
calling them a
have to
third
think
world
about the idea of like what the economic embargoes that have been placed on Cuba
Right.
have
Yeah,
done.
and it's
And,
not
like, when
all
you-
that, but it's a big issue.
I mean, yeah, right. Like when you look at what Cuba's been able to accomplish,
Exactly.
it's actually incredible. Like they have
Yeah.
some of the best medical research in the world. Like they've
do.
developed some amazing vaccines that they provide to
Cancer research.
developing nations at no cost,
Right.
basically. Right, which is incredible. Like in terms of humanitarian aid, Cuba goes far and beyond what any nation of that size could be expected to do.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, that's a fair point,
it's really
yeah.
impressive, honestly, what
Yeah.
Cuba has done.
Especially considering their economic isolation.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like the, and just like in terms of like life expectancy being higher than the United States, like infant mortality being very low, literacy is one of the highest in the world.
Yeah.
Right. It's incredible. Like they have a very admirable system in many ways. I would
yeah,
say.
but a lot
One of
of
the few
Cubans
communist
have very,
nations
like,
that worked.
A lot of Cubans have very shoddy internet access. Like,
a lot of Americans have very shoddy.
that's true. I mean, if you want to like pull up the numbers on that, I'm guessing more Cubans.
Yeah, I mean,
I have
I would prefer to be alive than to be able to access Reddit.
Right.
I mean, that just okay. I mean, that's a reasonable statement. It just seems a little bit hyperbolic.
I mean, to be fair,
I would
going
rather
back-
have zero student debt than some student debt.
yeah, it's also
like,
a reasonable.
I would also,
statement.
yeah, I think that, like, yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. There are issues, right?
Yes.
There's issues with every country.
There's issues with everything. Going back to internet access, I have relatives in rural Iowa that have two options for internet: satellite and dial-up, because there is no infrastructure out there.
That's brutal.
Yeah, that's the reality in a lot of rural America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I mean, look at like capitalist nations in Latin America, like comparing to Cuba. Like a lot of them, not very great places to live either.
No,
Yeah.
not the best.
Well, I mean, Venezuela. You know, we could talk about
Yeah.
Capitalist nations in Latin America. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Venezuela. I mean, you could call Venezuela more socialist than.
More than half the
guess.
economy is privately owned.
That's true.
Well, I mean, right now, but like.
No, I mean, even when Maduro is in power.
But okay. I mean, but the
Like when the
prevalent
public sector
ideology.
versus private sector, like yeah, in name they
prevalent
call themselves
ideology.
socialists, but like a lot of
Yeah.
like so do a lot of places.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders says he's a socialist.
That's
Yeah,
true.
exactly.
He's a Democratic
He's clearly
socialist.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really more.
He's not even a
Not at
democratic
all.
socialist. He's a social
Yeah.
democrat.
No.
That's the closest.
Yeah.
Well, I
That's the
mean,
closest
could you
label.
even call him a social democrat?
think you
He's
could. Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
right of mainstream.
His
like,
foreign policy
Swedes,
is pretty conservative. He's
but
more of
by-
a liberal
exactly.
Democrat.
By
He's
American
a social fascist.
Yes, Yes.
Yeah.
No, but by American standards, he's pretty far left. By American standards.
Yeah, but American standards say that.
How is that even a gauge, though? How can you
Because
say
we live in America and Bernie Sanders
literally
does too.
just poll people and they'll say that Bernie Sanders is on the left. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's not.
Yeah.
I'm,
it's
I'm
not difficult.
specifically,
Yeah. Even.
I'm referring to American politics specifically because Bernie Sanders is in American politics.
Yeah,
I get.
Well,
Well,
I think, honestly, I think
I
that the
don't
whole
even-
idea of like left and right is pretty ridiculous.
I
at
don't
this point.
even. I don't
It
even
is.
think you can call Bernie a social democrat because his foreign policy, especially the war in Yugoslavia, is not. I would not call his actions to support Bill Clinton and the bombing of Yugoslavia, especially with depleted uranium bombs. Like
There were
as-
social democrats in the Second International that were also nationalists, right?
Yeah.
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 You,
Exactly.
I think that didn't make them not social democrats.
Yeah, you can be a nationalist while still having some left
Yeah, you
political
can be a
views.
national socialist.
You can, exactly. That's nationalism with some socialist with elements. Yeah. Yeah. Like that's
I guess in the traditional meaning of like
No, but like when you look at like the history of socialism, like there were socialist parties that like engaged in like the First and Second International that like were like in World War One, right? Was like
Yeah.
a huge reckoning for socialism.
Yeah,
and a
that's
lot of
why
socialist
the-
parties supported their country.
right. That's why
And,
the
like-
Second International failed.
Right, but like that's like that. Does that mean that they weren't social democrats, or does that mean that social democrats tend to side with their imperialist nation when they live in one? Like, are you going to be criticizing social democracy this way in order to proclaim some other version of socialism as better or more inclusive, or however you want to phrase it, or are you going to say that's not real social democracy?
I guess I wouldn't consider Bernie a social democrat by. I mean, not even. I don't.
Would
think,
you consider Bernstein a social democrat? We're going way
Yeah,
back.
I would. No, but I think the whole. I think the whole like comparing it to American politics. American politics is. It's just not. It's so fucked up, and I don't know.
Hey, so is German politics.
I don't think you can.
Yeah.
I don't think you can generally say Bernie is in the same like realm as like European social democrats.
yeah.
I mean, sure,
that's
his
fair.
domestic policy is you could call it that's in the realm of social democracy, but like foreign policy, he's conservative.
But so are a lot of European social democrats, though. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
a lot of European social democrats are also imperial. Like, kind of by virtue of being social democrats, they are imperialist.
Yeah, you have to be
Like,
kind of
in order to be a
imperialist.
social
Yeah.
democrat, you kind of have to support imperialism, even if you don't admit it, right? Like, your social democracy at that point, especially in Europe, like
Yeah.
explicitly in Europe, is based on the fruits of colonialism.
Right.
And if you don't specifically oppose that, which social democrats don't, then you're still supporting imperialism and colonialism.
Yeah.
So I think that it's completely fair to call Bernie Sanders a social democrat because his foreign policy actually aligns with social democracy, which is imperialist and colonialist.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's like my hatred of American politics. I just don't want to even.
I just feel like
He's
you're
not worth
giving,
calling
you're
a
giving
social
too
democrat.
much credit to
Yeah.
European politics. And I don't think you should be doing that because like European politics is pretty messed up as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Next topic.
Yeah, let's
All right. So let's talk about 9/11. Who did it?
George Bush.
He did.
George Bush blew up the towers. It was you. It was you.
I think it was Israel. No, I'm just
Just
kidding.
Assad.
The
Just
damn
kidding.
Israelis. Google it. Google it.
As someone who's studying the profession of structural engineering, when you have a plane that crashes into a building and destroys multiple columns that are supporting loads, what ends up happening is that load has to go somewhere. So it goes to other columns. And when you design a building, you design it specifically so that your columns and beams take certain loads. And when you disrupt that with something that wasn't considered in design, like a plane crashing into the building, you end up having columns that are overloaded and fail. And that's why the building collapsed.
So what you're saying is the tower was designed to collapse when it was hit by an airplane.
No, that's not something that comes into the design.
Can we do a little research to see what architecture firm created them?
That's a good question. Let's do that.
And did it have its formation in Israel?
I have heard like that the original World Trade Center was not built to last.
No.
That's what I've heard. Like the construction quality
A
was
plane
subpar.
Yeah.
crashing into a building is not something you consider when
And if
designing
you
a
listen
building.
to the Notorious B.I.G. song, he says "blow up like World Trade," and that came out in the 90s.
I mean, 90.
And
I mean,
the Simpsons
was
episode
was he
where they have
no,
the
but
episode that says
that first-
9/11 on it.
Yes. Was he referring to the 93 bombing?
Yeah,
though?
he was actually
that's what I
referring to
was
the 93
curious
bombing.
about. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, like I feel like a lot of people forget that the World Trade Center did suffer a major bombing in 1993.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy. It was in the garage. It was near if you knock out columns like near the foundation, that you run into bigger issues.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot more load. Because the lower you go to the ground, the more load you have. When the higher you go up in a building, the less load you have. But gravity, basically.
Incidentally, the 93
Some of those words.
Yeah.
the 93 bombing, the context of it is that there was a truck filled with 1,500 pounds of explosives that detonated in the underground garage of the North Tower. So that's like basically what happened as regard.
Did
with
people
regards to
die?
that. That's a good question. I'm looking it up. I don't think. Six people were killed and 1,042 were injured in the attack. Some of which were from smoke inhalation because that hole was the entire.
Pretty serious.
It was, and yeah, because the World Trade Center was made with asbestos.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, there are still cases of like firefighters and cops that were there on 9/11 who suffer to this day like debilitating effects from mesothelioma.
Well, that's what my grandpa
And they
got.
may be entitled to financial compensation.
My grandpa was an architect, and he got mesothelioma because he would go on construction sites, and they would just the dust they'd use was just in air. There was no the companies that
Gotta wear
supplied the
N95.
asbestos knew about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they didn't know. They didn't
Yeah.
mention
They didn't
to
do the
public.
research.
No.
That's why there's all those
Well,
lawsuits.
they knew it was bad, but they didn't disclose it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
My grandpa actually sued.
Who would have thought that, companies will knowingly harm people for their own profit?
I know, crazy.
And also, I would need to look up the context of this to really discuss it. But in the wake of 9/11, wasn't Trump like claiming that asbestos was actually good?
I don't know anything about that.
I wouldn't put it past
quick.
him.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, I've heard of some things. I've heard of him like
I think he was taken out of context.
talking positively about
He
asbestos.
was being sarcastic.
In the book The Art of the Comeback, which came out in 1997, here's just a quick quote from it. I don't know if this was ghostwritten or if this is actually him talking. I'm just going to read what he said about asbestos. I believe that the movement against asbestos was led by the mob because it was often mob-related companies that would do the asbestos removal. Great pressure was put on politicians, and as usual, the politicians relented. Millions of truckloads of this incredible fireproofing material were taken to special dump sites, and asbestos was replaced by materials that were supposedly safe, but couldn't hold a candle to asbestos in limiting the ravages of fire. So that's what Trump basically says about asbestos, and this was before 9/11.
Yeah, what a bunch of nonsense.
Hopefully, they were at least using the best asbestos.
Well, they don't use asbestos anymore in buildings.
That is correct.
That's correct. And
In the U.S.
Well, what's crazy is when my grandpa sued the company, since my grandpa was in the Navy during the Korean War, he said that, he got it from being in the Navy because ships in the Navy were fireproofed with asbestos.
Yeah.
What were the apartment complexes in Chicago? It was just voted on that they were owned by a nonprofit. They were owned by a nonprofit renting company, but it went bankrupt or like financially in ruins, and now the city decided to sell it to private enterprise.
Interesting.
It was just recently in Chicago,
I hadn't heard about that.
and the
Yeah,
alderman.
I don't know exactly what you're referring to.
Do you know about what part of the city that was in? Because I could look it up.
Little village,
Okay.
Latino neighborhood.
Yeah.
Little
I mean,
Village, I know what that is.
a little too.
So it was specifically Little Village. Was it?
There's a huge issue with demolitions in Little Village.
Yes,
recently.
I remember hearing about
Yeah.
that. There was the remains of a warehouse. I think it was either in Little Village or it was in Cicero, but there was a demolition of it. I believe it was back in July.
Yeah, I think that was in Little Village.
Yeah, like the brunt of it because because Cicero is just west of Little Village, and like there was basically a massive cloud of dust that kind of like cloaked that entire neighborhood. When
There was no warning to the people that lived there whatsoever.
no warning whatsoever.
Yeah.
So there was like a really like it would made like briefly it made. I don't know if it was national news, but definitely was in Chicago papers for a long time. It was in like Chicago local news for a long time. That the residents of Little Village were furious with how the planning went with regards to that because they weren't given any sort of air quality warning.
Yeah, it's really bad.
Well, isn't that in the nature of the city? Is just gentrification pushing out,
I don't think
making
that
the
has
city-
to do with
it's not.
gentrification.
It
making
really
the
isn't.
city more white?
That's a separate
Little
issue.
Village,
Yeah,
okay.
that is a separate issue.
I mean,
think.
yeah, like Little Village.
related, but it's not.
Little Village as a neighborhood is like 98% minority, so that doesn't really have much of a context with like regards to whiteness.
I mean, that's like kind of the point is that like that happens in communities that are not white, right? Like the
does.
city,
Yeah,
the
that-
city
that's
doesn't,
more the
doesn't
issue.
care to
Yeah.
notify people. The city will just demolish a building and like
Yeah.
Or,
completely
you know,
they
lower.
wouldn't do that in West Loop, right? Like
Here's a fun fact.
Yeah, I would imagine not.
Related to infrastructure in the city is what I didn't know is that CDOT, Chicago Department of Transportation, gets really political in terms of projects, and they'll spend a lot more money on like bridges and pedestrian walkways that are in the loop and look pretty that are in the center of the city, while bridges that are in dire repair
exactly.
in like the outskirts are just left.
Yeah, and they work on like
Which is such bullshit. And those pedestrian walkways are so expensive.
yeah, and people have been like lobbying for a circle line to go like around like a way to get between different lines outside of the loop.
Yeah.
like, for decades.
Yeah, that has been definitely
And it would like be a huge deal for like lots of people to be able to get between different places.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's not been prioritized because
like basically like an outer loop surrounding
Yeah,
larger
exactly.
parts of the city. Incidentally, another part of Chicago that's faced environmental challenges with regards to air quality is the southeast side. And although like historically it's had a very high Polish and Serbian population, but in recent decades it's become overwhelmingly Latino. And and basically since the 80s there's been a Southeast Environmental Task Force because there are a lot of it's basically part of the southeast side is essentially one big industrial park. So there's large issues with pollution with regards to like just industrial waste and smoke.
is there?
The Ford plant is down at 100 and something. It's like 130th in Torrance, somewhere around there.
Like kind of by Indiana border or something.
Yeah, close to that.
Yeah.
And there's other. There used to be a lot of steel mills around there, but a lot of them shut down in like the 80s.
It's pretty crazy. You don't always think about it, but like a lot of Chicago is like literally right on the border with Indiana.
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, yeah.
Like 1 meter over
Yeah,
in
like
there.
you know, my girlfriend and I often will go to Indiana on day trips, and we see that like it's. And I've actually since I'm a substitute teacher and I've subbed at the high school. It serves the like the two high schools that serve the southeast side, and it's interesting to note that like when you go through it, parts of it almost seem rural just because there's so many vacant lots and so many just like rundown buildings and empty factories. It's kind of like just odd to think that that is technically Chicago.
It's like
Yeah, I mean-
think of like Gary or Hammond.
Yeah,
or
it's like a
something.
mini Rust Belt within the city.
Yeah.
Chicago is like a lot larger in the south end than a lot of people who live on the north side realize.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
like
the south side is huge.
It's across a lot.
Calumet, was it Calumet City?
Calumet City is a suburb.
Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
that's South Chicago.
That's,
It-
well,
no, it's a suburb.
technically.
it's a suburb. We're referring to specifically Chicago proper, the
Okay.
southeast side. But like
like
the
if
area
you
near
go
the,
on the south side, like Blue Island, there's like
No, if you go, the bridges down there are like shit.
they are.
Like,
They absolutely
oh
are.
my god.
Oh, they
It's like-
yeah, like near the Calumet River. I've been down there before, and it's
CDOT has serious money allocation issues. like spending
like
millions.
one of the bridges. I forget which street it was on. I think it was on Ewing. Like I was on the bus going to suburban school, and we were stopped for like 20 minutes waiting for the bridge to go down.
yeah.
It's just compared to the bridges in the loop, it's just so run down and just dilapidated. I'm sure, and even like 40 years ago, this wouldn't have, like, more than like 40 to 50 years ago, this wouldn't have been an issue because those areas were so much more well populated. It was even like middle class at that time, just because there were so many factory jobs in that area.
Yeah, and then the factories closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the factories closing, people leave, and the people that remain, their standard of living goes way down just because there's like so few jobs around there.
There's few jobs. There's just few businesses. There's like not a lot of grocery stores. Even.
Yeah, food deserts.
Like food desert. Yeah.
Fight over material.
Yeah, and there's like no public transportation in a
Very
lot
little.
of the area.
It's a lot shoddier.
It's like very shoddy.
There's
like a
one
bus that comes once an hour.
There's one bus
maximum,
basically that
yeah.
serves the entire southeast side. It goes like from the 79th Street L stop through South Chicago down to Hegwish, and it's just that one bus.
There's no public parks.
There are some, but they're small.
It's crazy seeing like on it recently on Instagram. I followed this page of historic Chicago, and just seeing photos of this city back in the 1920s, just like Englewood having streetcars.
Oh yeah, I've seen. I know the pictures you're referring to. Like Englewood looks as bustling as the West Loop does now.
And it's just crazy is that when the city got rid of the streetcars, it paved over the rails and just burned streetcars.
Yeah. I think, and a big part of that, especially in Englewood and other parts of the South Side, was white flight. Because if you look at comparisons from even like 1950 to let's say 1980, because there was a large like shopping center in Englewood. It was like one of the biggest ones on the South Side, and in 1968 it closed. And just because the income, like it wasn't necessarily all due to racial shift, but there was a major income shift that occurred as a result, and just it didn't make a lot of sense for those larger corporations to maintain stores in areas that were not being frequented as often as other parts of the city.
I mean, it's just a vicious cycle, really.
Yeah.
Like
The Prime Minister of New Zealand won again. The Labour Party.
Yeah, well,
in
huge.
New Zealand had a huge
blowout.
win.
I mean, because she was seen as dealing with COVID very well.
Yeah.
She was one of the
I
like
mean,
on the
she
global,
was like in a global,
globally.
but also they're an island, so like
They're a secluded island that was like effectively managed, and also then aside from the larger cities, very low in terms of population density.
yeah, exactly. Like they had a head start, but they also did manage it pretty well.
Yeah.
So like it was a huge PR victory as well as just like generally a good thing that they did. Like they're completely back to normal because nobody in New Zealand has COVID.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're back to normal completely. Yeah. Anyway, so we're gonna talk about Trotsky also, or
I don't have anything to say about
You
Trotsky.
can talk about Trotsky. You guys.
what I do.
Okay. I mean, I don't know.
This is gonna be like you and Charlie,
Himself,
basically.
so I'd rather talk about Trotsky.
I guess in my early days of reading Marx, I was a huge Trotsky fan, and I don't know. I guess right now, in terms of communist theory, I admire Marx, Lenin, and Mao the most. Trotsky and Stalin, I just think that debate is so fucking pointless. It's a waste of time. Trotsky, his arguments about fascism and kind of defining it and how it develops are interesting. They're valuable in understanding how fascism works philosophically. I just, again, I don't know. I don't admire him enough to really. It's just not worth debating him and Stalin.
I don't really care about that. I literally have no opinion. I don't care about relitigating like internal Soviet politics from a century ago. Like that doesn't matter to me at all. Honestly, I think what I'm interested in more is like the ideology of Trotskyism and like how that shifts and influences different things.
It's its own. It's weird.
Yeah, like I honestly I think like one of the biggest problems of like supposedly left politics is this sort of obsession with again and again relitigating like, is this figure from history good or bad? And like I just think that's a stupid argument to have, regardless of who the figure you're talking about is.
I agree.
Right?
It's a
Whether
waste
you're
of
a
time.
communist or a liberal or a conservative or anything, like talking about is this historical person good or bad is just a dumb thing to do.
They existed in their own time in a different political and cultural context.
Yeah, and like it's just like it's so reductionist to like like just talk about like a binary like. I just think it's really like talking about any person as being good or bad, even if they're living today. I think is just not helpful at all.
Yeah. It's just
Well, I mean, some people are like. I mean, I don't think it's like a. How do I want to phrase this?
I think you can definitely criticize people, and it's good to criticize people.
Yeah, I meant more like, there's a lot of criticisms of people that definitely have legitimate basis.
Right.
It's
No,
like-
I don't disagree with that. I'm saying just like saying X, Y, Z person or people are good or are bad makes it harder to actively like critique what they're
and
doing
it's-
that's good or
it's-
bad.
And it's usually too simplistic of
Yeah.
a view to
I think
take,
the
really.
biggest issue with that debate is people that the biggest problem with people that get wrapped up in fighting over sectarian politics over Trotsky and Stalin is just it really moves the focus away from like I mean if you want to call it that the left or I guess if you want to generalize people that hold quote unquote Marxist viewpoints that debate just sucks up so much oxygen and energy it distracts people that hold those views from actually doing shit. And I think parties, especially in the United States, like the Socialist Party, they're such a fucking waste of time by engaging in that fight. They don't do anything.
all of the American supposedly left or communist parties are such nerds about stupid minutia of like history that like no real like someone who's not already interested in that would ever care about.
Exactly.
Right? Like the arguments between like PSL and like the what's the socialist alternative, right, which is like the Trotskyist party.
Yeah.
It's like it's nobody cares, right? Like they're so I mean platypus is a little bit platypus isn't a party,
No,
right? Like
it's a book club.
I mean I have my own opinions on platypus, but I
a
think
way-
that's neither here nor there.
It's a force of it. It's just it doesn't help the movement. It just drags it down.
Yeah, I think it's like I like to think about. I think in Cuba, I think Che had a good perspective on like arguments about like someone was like, oh, like this group of people are reading Trotsky. Don't you want to like get rid of them? He's like, have you read Trotsky? You should read him. Like, you should read everything. Like, if something is people are reading it and talking about it, you should read it. And if you have criticism of it, bring up those criticisms, right? Like, it's such a different vision than like the Soviet model, where it's like if you're reading the wrong thing, they'll kill you. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's one thing about Cuba's model that is like definitely admirable to look at. Is like they always maintain that like freedom of. I don't want to say freedom of criticism because that has a certain aspect of like. That has a historical connotation, especially in Soviet history. But like freedom of thought and expression, I think was available in Cuba in ways that it wasn't in the Soviet Union and in communist China as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other long conversation, but
In Bolivia, they recently had an election, and the Socialist Party won a major win.
Although the what's his name? Something with an A. The guy that won the presidency. Says
check real quick.
something. It starts with an A.
starts with an A, gotcha.
AR, I think. But he said that Morales will play no role, and they will have to implement austerity measures.
Oh no!
Although to be fair, Elon Musk did kind of get back the fuck off. Although to be fair, he does have large lithium mines in China that he uses. Luis Arce,
Arce, yeah.
Yeah.
I knew it was like ARC. Yeah.
the former guy was Evo Morales.
Yeah, I know.
Morales.
Evo Morales was
everyone
cool.
knows Evo.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was
awesome.
hugely popular.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, I think it's still good news, right? That like the far right coup that was supported by America and OAS is pretty much vanquished at this point.
Yeah, that's good.
Which is definitely good news, right?
Yeah.
Like,
That
and
is
to
definitely
see
good
all
news.
those people that supported bitching on Twitter is hilarious, right? Like,
For a brief moment, imperialism lost.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta give Bolivia credit.
Yeah.
They managed to actually push back on imperialism. They managed to push back on a power that has cooed a lot of countries. As Musk said, we will coup whoever we want to, but I guess Bolivia couldn't. They couldn't put up with it. I mean,
yeah. Shout out to Bolivia.
shout out to Bolivia. And with that, we conclude this edition of Windy City Radio. Thanks for joining us.